Welcome back to another episode of the Let's Talk More Work podcast. For those of you that have followed along, this may come as a surprise or this may not come as a surprise. As many of you know, we also have a Let's Talk More Work Facebook group where we are trying to build a high performance culture. We read high performance books, we theorize over habits and exercises to be more efficient with whatever it is that each of us do, and we share ideas about how each of us strive for more in our lives. Instead of the Facebook group being an extension of the podcast, now the podcast will be an extension of the Facebook group. Our episodes now will be roundtable discussions about the topics we are reading and whatever book it is that we are reading. This month is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. So for this episode, you'll be hearing a roundtable discussion with Giselle, professional soccer players Michael Lansing and John Hollinger, as well as med student Matthew Bush and college soccer player Max Blacker, along with myself. If you are interested in getting involved in building this culture with us, reach out. We'd love to have you. Without further ado, welcome to our first Let's Talk More Work roundtable discussion.
Let's Talk More Work podcast.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming on to the first Let's Talk More Work roundtable discussion. This week we have the first 6 chapters of Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. So for those listening, for those who aren't coming or haven't gotten on one of our book club, air quotes, discussions before, basically we have a bunch of questions that we're going to ask that goes through the first 6 chapters, and then we'll run from there. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about was I have a decent amount of skepticism with the accountability mirror that David Goggins talks about in the early chapters. I'm curious, has anybody tried it? Do you feel it's been successful? Why not? I'm kind of hesitant to use it. Something I've noticed about myself is, the more I think about something, the more I read it, the more I believe it. And if I were to write an actual flaw, for example, not confident in whatever situation, if I were to read that every day, is that benefiting me? I don't think it would. What do you guys think?
I think for me, I don't use a mirror, but obviously we talk a lot about journaling and reflecting and things like that. So when I am journaling and I am assessing or reevaluating, like, I'm lacking in this certain whatever category, I'll write it down, but then I'll immediately put, like, what's the action to solve it right after. So I think at least that works for me. I think I kind of agree with you with seeing, like, on the mirror, like, Giselle, you're shit. I'm going to probably think I'm shit. So.
Yeah, I think, there's certain flaws, maybe we'll say certain things to hold yourselves accountable. When I think about this question, I'm like, all right, well, if I wrote, not confident, not this, not that on a mirror, and then woke up and looked at it every day, maybe that's not the right thing I should be talking about. Maybe if I said on the mirror, whatever, whether your mirror is a journal or an actual mirror, maybe if it said, make sure you're going to bed early, make sure you're staying on top of nutrition, or, make your bed when you wake up, those kinds of things. Maybe that's a way to make the accountability mirror more effective. Has anybody tried it, played around with it? Matt, Mike, John, anything?
I haven't done the accountability mirror, but what I do, I've done this for, I did this for a little time, but not too much. I would write down, like, all the insecurities that I had, or like things that would just, like, kind of piss me off or make me angry, and just to get it out on pen and paper. And then I would take it and I'd rip it up and throw it away. And, someone had told me that, and they're like, it'll help you, feel a lot more free. 'Cause, like, it's better than just, like, keeping everything inside, So, like, the fact that you throw it away too, it's like, okay, I got it down on paper and, like, I threw it away, like screw that,
No, yeah, that's a great way to find closure for sure. I think I'm more looking for, things that are the reminders, right? Like we're putting things down on paper and we want to remind ourselves of it instead of getting rid of it. Do you know what I mean? And that's why I say, like, I wouldn't write not confident or whatever it is, because like I said, the more I see it, I do feel like I'll start to believe it. And, speaking to my context, goalkeeping is very psychological, as we know. So if I can trick myself, maybe I am tricking myself into believing that I'm this or I'm that, I think it's going to be more in my self-interest to, trick myself to believing that I am high level or more high level than I thought I was, if that makes sense.
I guess I'm gonna add to it. I was gonna say, like, I've done something a bit similar. I haven't like written down things like near my mirror so I can look at them, or written down negative things that I feel about myself. But I've written down in my notes section on my phone like 5 things I want to get done for the day. Screenshot it and then set it as my background on my phone. So every time I'm opening my phone, I'm seeing these 5 things, and if I'm not getting them done, like it's kind of in the back of my head. So if I say that I'm going to go on a run, and it's 8 o'clock at night and I haven't gone on a run yet, like it's on my phone. I kind of want to get it done. Now this was something I did maybe when I was a little bit less disciplined, but I think now I don't necessarily need to do it. Maybe I just throw it in a journal or something, like I want to do these things in a day that I think are going to help me improve, either in goalkeeping or in life, or be on a stricter schedule or whatever. I don't need those at the forefront of my head anymore. Like I kind of just do it automatically. But I think how many times a day do you pick up your phone? Like, I mean, putting it as the background on your phone would be quite a simple way to remind yourself to do something, or to improve on something. I think it's a little trick.
Yeah, you touched on an idea there that David Goggins brought up in the book about when you don't get something done, that it kind of just pisses you off. And I felt like I related to that so much. And we talked about it, I think, on the last call, where I write down like a ridiculous amount of things maybe for a given day, and I'll be like, I didn't get to that, and then it'll just kind of wind me up, but yeah, I think having those kind of reminders, I think is interesting that you used to put it as your background. I actually have, for my background right now, is we played Maccabi Haifa when I was in Israel, and we got piped 5-0. And it's kind of just, it's a screenshot of that scoreline, and it's just like a reminder to kind of, humble me a bit at times, but also like, a goal, and it's something that, and actually so my freshman year at Monmouth, we lost in the finals of the conference tournament to Quinnipiac. And the following year, I printed out a big picture of Quinnipiac holding the championship trophy, and I posted it in our locker room. And every day we walk in from training, every day we walk out, we saw the picture of that of Quinnipiac holding the trophy. Sophomore year, we won. So it's just like these kind of little reminders that, if it just gives us that 1%, if it just gives us that 1% every day, maybe it's worth it. Something to try out for maybe the guys that aren't doing, those kind of subtle reminders type things. And they had that in one of the previous books that we wrote, or we listened to, High Performance Habits, those kind of alarms a few times a day, right? 3 pieces you want to, 3 characteristics you want to embody, and have that be a notification every day. I think those little things are really important, but I think we've pushed that question a good bit. Giselle, if you want to move on to the next part.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys have heard this saying before. I've seen this a lot in just other strength coaches posting, and I'm pretty sure it's in a weight room. I forgot which one. But the quote is, you don't rise to the level of your expectations, you fall back on the level of your training. So this is kind of in regards to callousing the mind, right? The more you condition yourself to endure suffering and fight it and beat it every time, the more you could obviously handle, right? And you could be more prepared when you're feeling really low and when shit hits the fan. So when you guys are tired, when you're asking, or when you're questioning yourself, like, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this? Should I quit? What do you guys fall back on? What do you hold on to battle through those moments of adversity, short term, maybe like you're down 2-1 in the last final minutes, or long term, like you're studying, you're just trying to get your degree or something like that? Any examples there you guys could give? Oh, everyone's thinking.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, for me,
All right.
Go ahead, Max.
What I normally do is I kind of just think of the end goal. Goggins touched on it a bit. He remembered why he wanted to become a SEAL, and that he wanted to become a SEAL, which was the reason why he kept pushing. But it's kind of like amazing how he was able to, I guess, capture that moment, because I've never really thought about it much in detail, how he captured that moment and wrote it out in his book. Just because when you're at that point, that, like, I guess, tipping point in whatever it is, a workout or anything in life really, and you just get to a point where you're between quitting or keeping going, like fight or flight mode, which Goggins was talking about before. He kind of was able to, I guess, capture that all, and he wrote like a few paragraphs on it. And like, I never really, because it's such a quick, like, split second thing that, like, you never really even think of. You either quit and give up, or you just keep going and move on. So for me, like, I remember my end goal, and that's what's able to allow me to keep pushing.
I think I very rarely, when you reference like remembering, your why are you doing this? It is more often I think of my why when I'm hitting more of a long-term obstacle. So like the knee injuries, is more, I'm more likely to reference like, why am I doing this, than I am if we were to be down 2-1 or we just conceded a shitter or something like that. You know what I mean? I'm not, it's very rare where I'll concede a goal and I'll be like, oh, why are you doing this? No, and I don't know if that's just me or other, I mean, we've all been athletes or still athletes on this call. Like, I'm curious, when you guys do go down or experience adversity within a game, are you thinking about your why in that moment? I don't think I ever have.
I think that was just a really specific situation, like an example I tried to give. That's not necessarily like what I was getting at. I was thinking like more like everything's going completely wrong in that very moment, and you're like, why the fuck is this happening to me? Like, why am I putting myself through whatever the situation is? I think. Yeah,
I mean, for me, I from some of the experiences that I've had to go through, and we've all had our fair share of adversity. I feel like my why has developed through that adversity to the point where I really truly believe that what I'm doing is what I was put on the earth to do. And I've said this to, I think, Blacker before. I think I might have said this. I feel like my purpose is to help people, and my context just happens to be through goalkeeping. If that makes sense. So when, go through another surgery, get released, whatever it is, the why doesn't change, right? And sometimes I need to remind myself of that. But for me, that's my why. Do you guys have that why already?
I do. Pretty similar to your why. I mean, in terms of helping people, it's like why I'm going into medicine.
Yeah.
I think the thing I fall back on is trying to be the best community member that I could possibly be. Try and be the person that people can rely on. Try and be the person that is there to help, when people need the help that they need. So that's definitely my why from like a professional point of view. The other why that I always fall back on, I mean, it might sound corny, is just like, I honestly can't wait to start a family. Can't wait to have my own family. Can't wait to be a dad. Can't wait to be, a coach, just have that, take that next step in life. That gets me through a lot.
Yeah.
Again, not necessarily the immediate, like, damn, this test coming up's gonna suck, but like the bigger picture why. In sports, the thing that got me through the tough times was thinking about past successes, thinking about past championships, thinking about, passing fitness tests, past big wins, like even if we went down, like I would always, even in college, I always thought about our national championship of TSF. Like when we went down and we came back, like that will always stick with me.
Well, that's literally the idea of Callous Mind, right? We're thinking about what we've been through before, and we're recalling those kind of experiences. No, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I relate to that as well. So for those of you that don't know, when Matt says, I want to start a family, corny, Matt actually has 80 cousins on no there's like a running joke. Matt has an absurd amount of cousins within his immediate family.
48 cousins is the exact number, so it's a big family, but like that's always been something that's stuck with me for my whole life.
So one of the quotes from the book, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, but something we often forget: no matter how bad things get, no matter how bad the torture, all bad things will end. The second you forget that, you let your emotions take control. So David Goggins was the guy who smiled when shit got tough at Hell Week, right? Is it possible he developed a very strong ability to cope while he was being abused as a child? What does that say for the importance of perspective and experience compared to years of domestic violence? A week of hard work at Bud's must have felt way less stressful for David Goggins than for an average person. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's coping or surviving. I guess it is coping, and I guess it's like a really tough and aggressive situation to be in. Not that I can really talk on this, but I think if you need to survive, like you're gonna find whatever way to adapt to the situation. And like you said, different experiences and perspectives will help you callous your mind. And you said like the adversity helps you later down the road. And I think that's kind of where he could, get to SEAL training, know why he's there, and then go back in time in his head and think like, oh, I've been through harder shit than this. This is nothing. So
that's something that, and Matt, you touched about this, and I lost it for a second, but the why often, I feel like if you can really and clearly explain your why, I feel like it comes from an immense sense of purpose, whatever the context is. Like, I genuinely feel like this is my purpose. Matt, you genuinely feel like this is your purpose. Maybe David Goggins, whether subconsciously or consciously from a young age, genuinely felt like his life had more purpose than what he was experiencing at the time.
Well, he said he wanted to get out of that town. He was like, I can't stay in this town. It was extremely racist, and he experienced an insane amount of, adverse childhood experiences. And the one way for him to get out was to join the Air Force. And I think that turned into his why, and it stuck with him. But it wasn't like an escapism. It was, I'm going to use what happened to me to become more resilient so that I can get on with my life, and that I'm not just going to like cheat my way through life or become this, fall into peer pressure and fall into, things you shouldn't be falling into.
Yeah. And I feel like that's the cliche you hear so much is like, oh, you just take the easy way out. Like, and he says it in his book. He's like, oh, I could have been a statistic. I could have been that. But inside him, I don't know if it's something that is taught or something that you can learn. Maybe it is, but like just that will that my life has more to it than, whatever it is. And finding that purpose, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, like how do you find your purpose? Like where does that even come from? And I feel like when David Goggins gets to, he had this idea in his head, like, oh, I'll join the Air Force, I'll join the military. And then all of a sudden it turns into this guy just really loves challenges. And now years later, he's his kidneys are giving out while he's doing a 100-mile race 3 days in advance. It's like, and that's what it turns into. And, when I think about that, I'm like, this guy's nuts. Like, for what? But he feels like that's what he's meant to do. He feels like that's part of his plan. So, and I think we all need a sense of that. And I think we all kind of do. When you really feel strong about your purpose, it's almost like, things that might sound ridiculous to another person doesn't really sound that ridiculous to you. Like for me, like going through med school, that sounds like a ridiculous task that I would never be able to complete. Matt's like, yeah, I could get through med school. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's a whole other discussion, but yes. It's almost that, like, you talked about it, like, people will have these crazy ideas when they feel the most comfortable.
Yes.
And like, I've felt that with med school. It's like, yeah, I could do med school. Like, I did science well in high school and did fine in college. And I was like, yeah, med school would be good. And then you get into it and you're just like, this is the worst thing. And I'm not gonna lie, like, med school sucks. Like, they don't really talk about it the way that it is realistically. And I think that applies in so many areas where excellence is required.
Yeah.
It becomes very uncomfortable very, very fast. And you need
But it's easier, and we've talked about this before, it's easier to get through those uncomfortable and that adversity when you do feel that very strong sense of purpose, right? So, like, for example, using my knee injuries again, it's super easy for me to just say, like, it's the knee that got me. It was the knee, But at the same time, it's like, I'm just making an excuse. And if I really feel like this is my purpose, then it doesn't matter what adversity I hit. I know I haven't reached my end goal. I don't even know if there is an end goal. It's just, do you know what I mean? But that's the time. And when you don't have that sense of purpose and you're doing something like, I have a lot of compassion for people who get caught up in whatever field of, they're working in, and they don't have that sense of purpose. And it's like, just, that obstacle feels a little bit bigger, and that punch in the face is a little bit harder to get back up from, if that makes sense. But Giselle.
Sure. Yeah, we can move on to the next question. And this is covering self-reflection again. I want to bring up, I thought this was really interesting when Goggins talks about Sean Dobbs in I forgot, was it his second time through or the first time through? I don't remember. But it was during SEAL training, and this guy was honestly just a monster, the way he described him. And he was really a physical specimen as an athlete, but Goggins kind of describes him as lacking between the ears. And I have a quote here that kind of talks about this. He says, think about where he was at that time. This man had excelled through the first few weeks of BUDS, and he'd come from nothing and was a phenomenal athlete. He had so many experiences along the way he could have leaned on. He calloused his mind plenty, but because his foundation was cracked when shit got real, he lost control of his mindset and became a slave to his self-doubt. Just reading that, it goes to show how important attacking and understanding your weaknesses are. Like, this guy is a little machine, and he ends up quitting. And Goggins, was kind of surprised when this happened. So what this this paragraph made me think about is, how comfortable or uncomfortable are you with swallowing the truth about yourself? Like, this guy was covering up whatever. I think he was just short or something. I forgot. He had self-confidence issues, and he made himself as physically superior as possible. But when it came down to when shit hit the fan, like, he just lost it. What do you guys think about this?
I think it's a huge, it's so easy to say the question, how comfortable or uncomfortable are you with swallowing the truth about yourself? You could be like, oh yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with it. I swallow the truth about myself. Like, I'm secure. You know what I mean? All of my downfalls, I'm totally okay with, blah, 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 blah. Like, that question is actually a lot harder to answer than I think people might realize. Like, I think in order for me to really say, I'm comfortable or uncomfortable with really acknowledging the truths that I don't want to acknowledge, I need to sit down with somebody and have like a really frank, a psychologist or a psychiatrist and say, this is what I feel. And, a lot of us, for sure, there's times where, maybe we aren't, maybe we're insecure about something, and you kind of just put on a front or you put on a face and you're like, I gotta do this because that's not the person I want to embody, and people expect differently of me, So I think self-reflection is a huge part of that. Being able to acknowledge that, I do have whatever insecurities, but then also being able to break them down. I think it's hard to do that without talking to somebody. And I think we should all, in relation, I was talking to Monty, who should be on this call, but he's not on this call. But I was talking to him about this. I was like, somebody, a sports psychologist had said that they were working with a professional athlete, or alluded to that. And he was just like, I don't know if I would be comfortable with him sharing that I was working on my psychology with the public. And I'm just like, we need to normalize it. I think it should be so much more normal. Like you would be fine saying that you're working with Joselle as a strength coach, no? Right. So what's the difference? You're working out your brain, you're working out your muscles. Like for me, I think the more people that do speak out and say, I'm totally, I'm talking to somebody, I'm working with somebody because I have not mastered my mind yet. I don't know if yet is relevant to that sentence. I don't know if you can master your mind for whatever, but I think it's something that we all need to be working on constantly. So to say, am I comfortable or uncomfortable with acknowledging the truths about myself? I would say I try to be. I would say there's also an incredible amount of space to improve there. I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts on that.
I mean, like when I think like deep down into like my childhood or anything, any failures or things like that, I think they kind of lead me back to the why.
Mm-hmm.
Like the things that I'm so uncomfortable about, like there's an example just personally, like I do what I do just because I was always that kid who didn't have that much confidence no matter how much I made it. Maybe I showed like I did, but deep down inside, I really didn't feel like I was okay with everything that was going on. Like I always wanted, I was just like pushing perfection too much, and I was always looking for more. And now I see that now with all the people I deal with, like talking to guys like you, or to you guys, and the podcast and all the kids that I work with. I'm like, dude, I see some of myself in these kids, and I don't want it to be like that. So I think me being able to own up to that and really like turn back the clock and be like, Joselle, that was you, bro. Like you have to help this guy out. So I think that's just another way to go about it. Yeah.
That actually points me in a different direction, because we talk about, finding your purpose. Maybe, and I don't know if this is truth or not, maybe when you can see yourself in the people you want to help, it gives you a little bit bigger or more of a sense of purpose, if that makes sense. So like in terms of me saying, okay, I want to help people and my medium happens to be goalkeeping, when I see, a youth goalkeeper who has a very similar technical flaw that I had when I was 14 years old that nobody corrected, I'm like, I need to have a conversation with this kid. I need to have a conversation. And I imagine that you have a lot of similar emotions, Joselle. When you see a kid maybe that, isn't confident, you're like, all right, I'll help you, find that. And I'm sure we all have that in our own kind of way.
It's definitely much easier to connect too when you can when they're like saying the same things you did, or you guys can like talk the same language. Like, I think that's why it's even more important to like, number one, normalize it, like you said, so everyone is like aware of like the guys who look like they're killing it on the big screen aren't really always like good up here.
Well, they're not robots, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think we definitely need to like bring up this topic more just in sports in general, and as coaches, being okay with understanding your flaws and like what are you going to do to change them. I think that's really big moving forward.
Yeah, I actually made a point. So I was listening to a podcast of Steve Clark, and obviously I've talked about this with plenty of you guys about I do think that we should all be talking to somebody. So I reached out to a sports psychologist through TFC, and I'm gonna start talking to somebody. So there it is, guys. I'm gonna try and normalize it, and that's I'm trying to take the next step in my game. And I feel like there's improvement to be made psychologically. So I'm going to get a coach, right? So, yeah. So the next point I wanted to make is this idea of taking souls that David Goggins brings up. Breaking your opponent and making them feel like you're impossible to beat. How do we feel about this? Is this sustainable? It actually kind of reminds me of Michael Jordan's mentality from The Last Dance. But then you also hear the idea of focus on yourself. Thinking about me specifically, I try to focus on myself the best I can. I think the more I'm comparing, the more I'm worrying about what someone else is doing, the more time I'm wasting that I could be using to get better or be just an ounce more focused. So should we be focused on taking souls, or should we be putting the blinders on and stay in our lane?
I want to put the blinders on and take souls on the way.
But not because you're paying attention to other people, just because that's how
they're there, and I'll snatch them up if they're in the way.
Mike, John, competing in professional environments, how do you guys feel about the idea of taking souls or staying in your own lane?
I personally, like, for me, I try to stay more in my own lane, right? Because I know that, like, I just know, like, building a relationships along the way is greater than, like, trying to mess with someone's mind in a negative way,
Mm-hmm.
And that's just my personal opinion, because, like, over the long run, it's like, okay, like, that's just another person too, and, like, over the long run, you never know, 2, 3, 4 years down the line, you don't know how they'll remember you. But I just think Goggins here is just on another level when he's talking about taking souls, so he's really trying to, like, he also talked about, like, taking real estate in their mind, basically, that they're only thinking about him. And I kind of agree with Joselle there. So it's like, okay, well, if I work so hard, or I and putting in the work and doing really well, that, like, maybe that's a byproduct of it, like,
Yeah.
when they leave the training ground, that's all they're thinking about is,
you don't even have to say anything at that point, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk more work.
Yeah.
I love that. Mike, what do you think, competing in professional environment every day? Are you kind of in the same thought process? Are you actively, there's been times in all of our careers where we've been starters, we haven't been starters. Do you find it fluctuates? Maybe, I think we talked about this a little bit when you were at, in regard to you at Bucknell, but how do you think that's developed through your pro career? Do you think you're more of a guy that keeps the blinders on, or you say, so-and-so doesn't have this, so I'm really going to try and show this today just so he knows? I can't hear you. Can anybody hear Mike?
No.
Okay, we're going to do some fancy editing here.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you.
All right. Sorry about that.
All good.
I was trying to pitch in before, and then other guys started talking. I was like, okay, I guess no one talk. No, I think that, like, you have to have your blinders on. I think it's very situational, but I think if you have your blinders on, you're not going to realize what other people are doing better than you, and I think you can learn from what other people are doing better than you. Maybe you're lacking in certain areas where other people are doing, better, and if you're maybe just putting your head down and trying to improve, your technique on something, but some other guy is doing it really, really well, you can learn a lot of things from that guy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you're going head to head in a drill or something like that, like, you got to put your head down and go. You can't be, buddy with someone.
Yeah, I think it's also there's another dynamic there that I witnessed my rookie year between two alphas that I played with, Steve Clark and Bill Hamid, where they're both such fierce competitors. And they're both got that stay in their lane, focused on myself kind of mentality. But then in between sets, like there would be that little passive aggressive kind of conversation where it's like, this and that, this and that. And it's got to be there's a fine balance, where you're having that kind of passive aggressive banter, but at the same time, you're focused on yourself. It's definitely difficult. I want to talk to Max and hear how he's dealt with that a little bit at Brandeis. Do you think your first 2 years in college, you were more of a stay in your lane guy or more of a, I need to beat this guy out today kind of guy?
Yeah, I mean, my freshman year, I came in. There were two juniors that I was competing with at the time, so it was more like I'm going to stay on my lane. I'm going to learn from these older guys, take away what I can from them, and then coming in to my sophomore year, it was a lot more. I guess I would say it was a mix. I had my blinders on, but I guess I was also trying to take souls at the same time. Like literally every set in training, I was competing. I was focusing on myself, but at the same time, I was trying to do better than the other keepers. And like my freshman year, those guys were bigger and stronger than me because I hadn't really been around the weight room too much in high school. So like we'd be in the weight room and like one of the older guys would be squatting like ridiculous numbers, and I can't do that. So that's not necessarily something where I can compete with him there, but on the field, it was pretty competitive, especially sophomore year. Definitely, like I know for ever since we got sent home for the whole COVID thing, for the first few months we would have like challenges between the team, and we'd have to do like a long body weight workout, and we'd have to record our times. And every week I would save mine until the end of the day and see what everyone got, and I would single guys out, and I'm like, I'm gonna beat this guy today.
Interesting. I think when you were talking about your freshman year there, I think we've all had that kind of experience, whether it's in high school or in college, where, you come into a new environment and there's times where, and I felt like I've done this, maybe I've given too much respect to the people who are already there. And I try to be like, I'm not trying to come in and rustle feathers. Is that it?
Yeah.
Ruffle,
job.
whatever it is. I'm not trying to be, a guy that's going to cause issues or anything. I'm going to do my job, do my work, pay my dues. And then time starts to push on and you're like, I'm better than this guy. Like what's going on here? So I think it's definitely important. I mean, it's a team sport, right? I mean, soccer, but, in team sports in general, it's obviously important to have mutual respect and trust and loyalty and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, with the person that you're directly competing with, I would definitely be wary. I would say for younger athletes to be wary of the amount of respect you're just handing over when you walk into an environment. I think that's something that I probably would have benefited from if I heard before high school and before college, because I've always been a guy that's just like, yeah, I want to be a good team guy. It's team before me, all that kind of stuff. But then there are times where you get caught up and you're just like, yeah, older guy, that's fine. I got to pay my dues. But then at the same time, it's like, there has to be a time where I'm no longer a freshman and you're no longer a junior, and we are just battling, and whoever wins wins. So I would say that's an important piece to that for sure.
100%. I have a little story on Bill Hamid over in Mitchell, and he was riding the bench behind an older guy, more experienced, very well known in Denmark, and he rustled some feathers in the locker room and in the office, and he got playing time. He got a couple of games, and I went to my goalkeeper coach and I was like, listen, I've been doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. I'm like, being a good teammate. I'm, training hard. I'm beating this guy out in training.
why am I not playing? He was like, well, maybe you do need to cause a little more, racket in the office, or like, come knocking down the coach's door. Like, you can't always just be the nice guy. So that's definitely something I've learned along the way as well. You can't always be Mr. Nice Guy.
That's something that I've learned over the last 2 seasons, I would say, where, my rookie year was a similar situation: pay your dues, respect, all that kind of stuff. And then my second season in Israel, I walked in and I was the starter. There wasn't really any significant competition. Very nice people, good goalkeepers over there, but they signed me as the starter. And then I get to TFC2, and now there's a little bit of a fight. Now there's guys that, it's not clear cut who the starter really is. And especially coming back from knee surgery, it was like, I want to be a good person. But then I had that similar conversation with my goalkeeper coach. It was like, first off, don't give respect that isn't earned. I be a respectful person for sure. But then, and I'm not saying do this all the time, but there are times in professional sports for sure where it might be time to rustle some feathers, and making sure you have the conversation with the right people before you go do that. And also make sure you back up your words, because when you walk in and you're knocking down the door, and then you get on the field and you don't back that up, well, there goes every bit of leverage you had when you walked into that door, because if you knock on that door again, the door is going to stay closed more than likely. So very good point, Mike, I would say.
Yeah, okay, so we could move on to my last question. So let's say you haven't faced any traumatic experiences like Goggins did, such as child abuse or racism. How do you cultivate a why that is that powerful, as it is painful? Is that even necessary? And where can you find that inspiration? Where can you find that fight if you never experienced something that bad? Do you even need to find something strong like that?
I got a few on this one.
Yeah.
Go on, Mike.
For one, first few years of my professional career, I would say, like, all of my focus was on me. And, mess up in a game, whatever, everything's on me. Once I stopped focusing on me and started focusing on, people around me, friends, family, kids that I'm coaching now, try and move that focus away from myself and onto others, huge purpose change. Like, the purpose was not, all about me anymore. It was about other people too. And maybe I was selfish at the time. I don't know. I was just like focusing on what I was doing. But once that changed, there's so much more purpose out there than just about you. And then, you have to, you don't want to go through life and then look back and say, man, I could have been a much better me, or, there was a different me out there that I could have achieved, but I didn't put in the work, or something like that. Like, I think your purpose in life is to achieve the best you possible. And if you don't do that, then you've messed up somewhere along the way.
I think you're the only person who knows if you're actually putting your best foot forward. You're the only person who actually knows if you're actually giving the best Eric Klanowski every day and all of that. So how do I cultivate a why that is as powerful as it is painful? I think if I'm putting the best Eric Klanowski out there every day, and I'm asking for more out of life, and I'm, like we like to say, pushing the envelope, inevitably there's going to be adversity. And I think that's where, your why that is as powerful as it is painful comes into play. Because, all right, I really feel strong about what my purpose is, but that pain is going to come from whatever adversity I hit, right? So for me, knee surgeries, being released from DC, these kinds of things. Is it child abuse or racism or things like that? No, those are incredibly powerful and hard things to get through. And there's obviously an incredible amount of pain that goes with each of those. But for me, you know, I think if I'm really pushing the envelope, if I'm asking more of myself, if I'm putting the best version of Eric Klonowski out there every day, it's inevitable that I'm going to hit some kind of obstacle at some point. And that's when, you know, the power of my purpose also is intertwined with the pain, adversity that you're going to hit. So like I said, only you know, you're going to, and we can tie that back with the accountability mirror. You know, you every day when you go into the bathroom and you look at that mirror, you know, if I'm putting the best Eric Klonowski out there, if I'll look myself in the face and say, yeah, that was a real, and I had a moment a couple weeks ago where with all of the, you know, happenings in the world right now, I feel particularly strongly about certain topics. And I was talking about one of those topics with a family member, and I just didn't want to hear it anymore because I felt like it was, they were coming from a very selfish perspective. And following that, I felt very strongly about my opinion. But then an immense amount of guilt came over me in the following days because I'm like, you know, whether their opinion is different, all of my emotions, I shouldn't have been so aggressive with them, because what I was doing, I wasn't making an accurate representation of who I wanted to be. I wasn't embodying somebody. I'm saying, oh, you need to be more compassionate. How compassionate was I being? Do you know what I mean? So that kind of thing. And like I said, you'll know. And that's where I think my answer to how do I cultivate a why that's as powerful as it is painful. You look yourself in the mirror every day and you'll know.
Yeah. I think if you never experience things like racism, if you've never experienced things like child abuse, any of those, you know, very, very severe adverse events, I think the first step is to definitely check your privilege, right? Look at yourself, think about why you aren't experiencing those things. That'll be your first big or not adverse event. That'll be your big first push to develop a why, you know? Yeah. Because I think naturally when you check that privilege, you naturally take the next step towards gratitude. And that gratitude could then be spread to serving others and, you know, essentially using the good life you have to help other people. But I think at the end of the day, the hardest part is trying to be as authentic as possible, right? Yes. Trying to and value that authenticity to the extent that it becomes a habit. And it's really, really hard to constantly be that authentic, because like it's very and this is why the world of social media sucks, because it's just like, how authentic can you actually be when everyone's, you know, trying to be as influential as they possibly can on Instagram and only posting the good things? You know, you only see the good things. You get, you know, jealous of people on boats and all this stuff. But how authentic is that? And how hard is it going to be to, you know, be constantly authentic so that you can be a better person, not only for yourself, but for others too, right? Because when you check that and you're trying to live with gratitude, it can be kind of hard to do that at an excellent level, which I think is what we're kind of striving for here.
100%. I think you hit on a really good point there with social media, and something Joselle and I talk about. It's like, oh, well, with social media, it's great because everything's out there. It's super easy for people to, you know, be transparent, but it's also super easy for all of us on social media to guide the conversation of who we are and what kind of person we are. And is our social media profile really exactly who we are? You know, it's very rare where, you know, maybe you meet somebody on social media and then you actually talk to them and you're like, this is exactly what I expected you to be like. You know what I mean? So I think that's a very good point in terms of figuring out who you actually are. But that's the extent of our 3 questions each from Giselle and I for the directed conversation. If you guys have any thoughts that we didn't touch on or points from the book, I know we talked about David Goggins' 100-mile race where his kidney falls apart and he has a very traumatic experience. If there's anything like that you guys want to touch on, now is the time. So
yeah, I actually wanted to ask you guys a question. So the version I'm listening to is like the Amazon version on the Audible app. Are you guys getting the annotations?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to talk about that. I think that aspect of it is so cool. So I'm glad I'm not reading the book with the actual book. And I think at one point, I think it was when he was in Bud's training, and Goggins was talking about how he was just enduring all this pain and suffering, and he was able to push through it. And then the narrator was just like it makes me sound like the biggest pussy ever.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny, but then it also just I feel like that made me realize that everyone has different experiences and different, I guess, paths through life. Like obviously we're not going through Bud's training or anything as severe like that, or enduring pain, as much pain as he did in those moments. But it's just in, I guess, smaller doses. So yeah, I mean, it's everyone in their life is going to face adversity and face problems and struggles. But it's how you get through it. And maybe we're not doing things as extreme as Goggins is, but we like goals are similar, which is why obviously he's published this book.
Yeah, I relate so much to that. I think the annotations that you talk about, like they really change a lot of what the book, like how I absorb the book. So when they'll talk about like a little bit more of the context after they read the passage, I'm like, holy, that is way more aggressive than I thought it was. So if you guys aren't listening to the audiobook, I would give it a shot. I would give it for guys on the call and in the Facebook group in general, give that a chance, because there's a lot more information that comes with the annotations, and there's definitely a lot of value in there. But Matt, Mike, John, any other thoughts you guys wanted to touch on?
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Oh, my bad. You know how we were talking about the accountability mirror, and I also, it was in chapter 6, I think, when he talks about the cookie jar as well, right?
Yeah.
Experiences. So I was just thinking, like, you know, what if you kind of paired those two together, right? Like you see the accountability mirror and then you go to the cookie jar and you pick out something that you know, that like your past success.
Yeah.
Build back your confidence up.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good idea. I haven't, I think our first book, High Performance Habits, it was like I'm doing everything that the book asks us to do, and I've actually taken on journaling and meditation a lot more than I have before. I would say I'm every time one of those performance prompts kind of things comes up, I'm like, am I going to give this a go? Am I not going to give this a go? How purposeful do I really feel this is? And maybe in reality, I should just give it a shot and take a chance on it. But also, I want to be a little bit more calculated about how I'm going to move forward. So maybe that's a good idea. Do you guys think that after these discussions, you're going to try maybe the cookie jar idea or the accountability mirror or anything like that? Or are you guys... No, Giselle's like, there's no chance I'm doing the accountability mirror. I don't know. I think I might give it a shot. But I think for some people, maybe, why not? For others, maybe if you feel like you've hit a good amount of habits and you're in a good routine, then maybe not as well. But good to have if you needed to use it.
Yeah,
Mike,
yeah, go ahead, Mike. Sorry. I don't want to.
No, it's okay.
I'll write it down.
I'm good now.
All right. So
Go ahead, Giselle.
what was I going to say? Oh, I think like it's important to, even if you don't do the prompts, like we're talking about all these techniques that Goggins uses, it's important to know the concept behind them, right? So we're talking about like putting sticky notes on a mirror, like maybe you don't have to do that, but I think just like visualizing what you're going to go through or what you want to be or how you're going to do it. Like for me, I literally went on a website, I created the gym I want to have, and I printed it out and I have it in front of me and I look at it every day. I'm like, dude, you need to open this. Like you need to see yourself in here, like training people like that. That's what I need to see for me to hold on to it like so strongly. And when I get there, it'll feel like, we talked about this before, Eric, like you want to act like the person you want to be already. And it's just a reminder for me. So what I get out of the accountability mirror and the cookie jar or whatever is the reminders of like, how many different ways can you incorporate your why into your daily routine?
Yeah.
How many different ways can you incorporate your purpose into whoever you're talking to? Maybe they're not. Yeah, go ahead.
We talked about this on the episode with Ian Harks, that difference between belief and hope, right? It's like, okay, when you don't have that vision in front of you every day, you're kind of like hoping. There's a sense of randomness to how you're going to move forward in that sense, but also you're kind of hoping that you can get there. But then on the other side of that, if you're looking at the gym every day and you believe that you're going to open that gym someday, the likelihood you're going to open that gym has just improved. And I fully believe that. Like Matt, for example, if you went into med school and you were like, man, I don't know if I could do this, you might still get through it. At the same time, if you went in there and was like, from every inch of my being, believe that I am meant to be a doctor, I think the likelihood of you becoming a doctor skyrockets. I don't know if any of you guys can relate to that.
And it's like, if you're going to try and achieve something, that high, or, achieve anything that's great, and it's not everything that is a part of you, you're going to cost yourself so much mentally. You're just going to because it's just not going to feel right. And it's not going to really serve your purpose, and you're not actually being authentic. It'll be kind of like a facade, and you'll get places, but it won't be satisfying. Like it won't necessarily feel as good as it possibly could.
100%. Mike, what was your last thought that we cut out?
I think it was about celebrating the little wins along the way. And throughout my career, I've kind of been told to kind of try and stay as neutral as I can, like through the wins and the losses, the highs, the lows, like try and stay as neutral as you can. But then Goggins kind of talks about celebrating the little wins and using them as kindling to kind of stoke this big fire. And I think that went in together with the cookie jar kind of thing. But I want to know what your guys' take is. Like, should you be celebrating the little wins? Like Kobe Bryant, I think in Game 4 of I don't know, the finals, a reporter asked him why he wasn't smiling after they won. He was like, "We didn't win anything. It's just Game 4. Like, we got more games to go." You know what I mean? They just won a huge game.
I think you need to really understand how you tick individually, because there'll be guys that, they have the ability to, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, take over a game and really control things themselves if they really want to. They know that, they have reached that mastery of whatever it is that they do, that they know that it will come down to their level of focus or not. And then for, I don't want to say the rest of us normal people, but the people that are the vast majority who have not mastered or are at the top 1% in their field. And then also in relation to basketball, they can have way more control. So like the best basketball player ever will have way more control over the final of a game than the best goalkeeper ever, I think you need, from a goalkeeper's perspective, I think you need to take those small wins, but I also feel like you can't get ahead of yourself. I think it's like, okay, acknowledge it, be very present, be in the moment of, we just did something very important, and that's gratifying. and very satisfying. But then at the same time, have that kind of developmental mindset that's like, great, fantastic moment that we just had, enjoy it, but there's more to it. There's more to chase. You know what I mean? And if you're in that mindset of whether this win or loss, whether I win or lose this game, it's going to make me better. I think that's where it's easier to get through, not getting too high or not getting too low. If it's all just to develop and just to get better, because in reality, are you ever going to be a finished product or be that perfect idea of yourself? I don't know. I don't think it's possible necessarily, but I think being very present in the moment while also having the clarity to say there's more ahead. It has to be some kind of balance, but it also has to be there has to be a significant amount of reflection, I think. But that's just my take. Thoughts from anyone on that?
I think celebrating the small wins keeps things in perspective in a very healthy and productive way.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't celebrate the small wins, you're going to have huge gaps between the big wins. And like, that's not always going to feel that good. And that kindling to fuel the fire isn't going to be there. When you celebrate the small wins, you literally give yourself the mental space to say, I'm proud of myself for what I just did. Let's move forward. Because it is a small win. You're not going to just say, I've reached my potential, and stop what you're doing. But you can say, I'm clearly showing the evidence that I'm capable of reaching the next goal.
100%.
So I think that celebration helps just keep that all in perspective. And I think without it, you can get into a little bit of a dark hole, just saying like, I haven't really accomplished anything, when in reality you just kind of missed it.
Yeah. All right, guys, I think we've hit on a lot of great topics. This was the first roundtable discussion of the Let's Talk More Work podcast. The first half of Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. So thank you guys all for coming on and being a part of it. We really appreciate it. But there you go. That's episode done.
Let's Talk More Work podcast.